Open Your Eyes is brought to you by the Belize Bank. Our country, your bank.
And welcome to Open Your Eyes.
Start your morning right.
I'm Marlene Cuellar.
And I'm Asana Ketano. Good morning.
And thank you for joining us this morning.
It's the final day in February.
That's right.
It's the 28th
Starting
of February.
off the week with the end.
Yeah, and we're starting off the week a bit wet, at least the work week, that is.
Right. I know. I started to hear the rain and I was trying to figure out what's happening. We're going to get our weather update in just a few to find out what we can expect. I'm hoping it's going to be a nice dry week. There's a lot going on.
Yes, indeed there is. And another of the things that we're looking forward to this week, if everything bodes well, is the lifting of the curfew. It was said to be March 1st. Tomorrow is March 1st. We'll see what happens there.
That is so true. We got to get into that. But let's take care of some of our early morning business, and that includes your motivation to start your day right. So we're going to get into our eye-opener taken from dailyom.com. Your eye-opener for this morning goes like this. Your home will be infused with supportive energy if you take the time to create a stress-free home. Sometimes our lives are so busy that we treat our homes as if they were impersonal places that we merely pass through. But we can make certain that our homes truly feel like our sanctuaries by taking the time to tend to them like gardens. We need care in order to offer us the beauty of their blooms. When we take the time to treat our homes like beloved treasures, we can shift their energy from being merely places to being wellsprings for the replenishment of our energy. Consider that homes are the outer reflections of those who live within. If we feel that the current appearance clashes with how we'd like to see ourselves, it can keep us from fully allowing our light to shine. Small things can make a big difference, like simply moving items so that we can constantly gaze upon the things we love the most, liberating the treasures we've hidden in our closets, using our best dishes, and making small repairs. Organizing and cleaning is a no-cost way to remove chaos from our homes and introduce more calm. Simplifying our space lets our imagination and energy roam free. We can choose to prioritize our homes, making them the true heart of our family's activities.
This is one of the best eye-openers in a while. I'll admit that much.
I knew you'd love this one. Go ahead.
Only because I believe in creating a space that is comfortable for family and friends. And there is no better place to invest that time and energy than your home, right? I'm avid when it comes to home improvement and just creating an environment where, you know, in my case, my children are comfortable, I am comfortable, everybody, including family and friends, are comfortable when we have them over. And it allows for a certain energy.
Yeah.
But it goes beyond creating the physical environment or the physical space. It has to do with the shared chemistry amongst everyone who lives in the home. Everyone has their individual role, be it young or old, but it's a matter of finding that chemistry that works in terms of being able to either avoid certain tension or to be able to, you know, discuss and resolve certain issues as well. And of course, to share a certain happiness.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think that, you know, you can't underestimate the place that you choose to rest. And it can be, and I think that the fine balance here is recognizing that it isn't necessarily the things you have in it, but how you make that space more comfortable for yourself.
Yeah.
And some people are very minimalistic. Less is more. They want as few things as possible. Some people want more things, and it can actually lead to quite a bit of clutter.
Yeah.
But the idea that you invest that time into making it a space that makes you feel more comfortable, like you can find peace, especially after you come home from whatever you've just faced in the world. I think that's such an important idea. And, you know, we do focus on our home space unconsciously. I think if you've ever found there are times you just have an inner urge to organize or to clean, suddenly you want to rearrange the furniture. And then if you sit and you think deeply enough, it's because there are things you wish you could or are reorganize in your life. The same thing with cleaning. It kind of sets you in a mode where, especially deep cleaning, I'm not talking everyday stuff, but it sets you in that mode where some people find it therapeutic.
It is actually. It is.
Yeah. I'd just say one thing though. I think, but do it for yourself, not necessarily because you're concerned with what other people are going to think about it, because that's when you add an extra pressure in your home space where you just don't need it. Yeah.
For me, I'm an outdoor guy, so I enjoy being outside of the house and just take time enjoying the garden space, enjoying the outdoors. And I think that in itself also allows for there to be some kind of, you know, like I don't have a man cave, right? But I enjoy being outside, just taking it all in and relaxing, and that creates my own personal space in a sense. Yeah. And everyone else in the house has their own space, but then there's this sense of community based on the family itself.
That's right. Well, in order to enjoy your outdoor space, you need some good weather.
Yes,
so, Francisca, you're on the line. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you today?
I'm doing good, thanks. And how about you all?
We're good. We're good. Starting off the week on a positive note.
That's right. With showers of blessings, which I hope are temporary.
Okay, guys. What's happening is that we have a stationary front near Yucatan. So it caused to build up of moisture in the atmosphere. So for today, we'll be seeing lots of cloudiness, and we'll be seeing a few showers occurring mainly along the coast and over southern areas of the country.
Okay, and what about the winds?
Okay, our winds have backed up to the north and northeast, 5 to 15 knots, and producing light chop seas, so that will produce 2 to 4 feet waves beyond the reef.
All right. And or temperatures, will the front at least cool things down if it's going to make things wet?
Okay, so we're seeing only 84 Fahrenheit along the coast this afternoon, 88 inland, and 74 up in the Maya Mountains. And then overnight, it's 72 along the coast, 64 inland, and 60 up in the Maya Mountains.
All right. And or extended forecast, how long is it going to be like this?
Okay, so tomorrow, Tuesday, we'll continue to see these showers, but we'll be seeing mostly over southern areas tomorrow during the daytime, and then during the nighttime, we'll see it coming back along the coast.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that update.
You're welcome.
You have a great day today.
Thanks, and you too.
All right.
All right, bye-bye.
So yeah, stationary front over Yucatan has given
Not over us. It's
weather.
not cold outside, right? It's a little bit wet, and especially if you're in the south, you're going to be feeling that. But throughout the country, you may be getting a shower here or there. But with that out of the way, we're going to shift gears now and focus on Eye on the News.
We spent a great deal of time last week covering what has been taking place between the Christian Workers Union, the representative body for the stevedores, the government of Belize as the mediator in a sense, and the Port of Belize Limited. As you would recall, for the better part of January, there was a deadlock between both parties, the stevedores, the waterfront workers, excuse me, and the Port of Belize Limited. The government stepped in to kind of, quell the tensions between the port and the dock workers. And of course, amid all of this, the government compensated the stevedores in a sum of $1.5 million for the damages that they would have faced when the port was privatized back in 2002, 20 years ago. What we saw happen as a result of this monies being earmarked for the CWU was a lawsuit for roughly the same amount, a little over $1 million for loss of revenue for the days when there was industrial action being taken by the Christian Workers Union stevedores. And so last week, the government of Belize deposited the $1.5 million into the account of the Christian Workers Union, notwithstanding the fact that there was an injunction being sought to block that from happening. Some would say the government may have jumped the gun in terms of, paying out the monies. And as a result, what is taking place now is the fact that an injunction is being filed or applied for to be able to stop the CWU from disbursing these monies to its membership. The president of the CWU, Evan Mose Hyde, was in the media last week speaking about matters concerning this sum of money and the fact that the Christian Workers Union is not set up in the way a private business is set up in terms of being able to deal with its financials. And so perhaps this is the window of opportunity that is being sought by the receiver to prevent the CWU from sharing the monies amongst its members. Now, that matter was filed before Justice Lisa Schumann on Friday, and it is expected that it will be heard in full today, and a decision will be rendered upon hearing the argument being brought before the Supreme Court. So that's the first thing that we're looking at. It's a continuation of coverage that we've been providing in terms of this particular issue for several weeks now.
Yeah.
And we're expecting that that decision, as I mentioned, will be handed down sometime today, as it is being treated with a sense of urgency.
Well, yeah, and I think everybody will be looking forward to seeing what's going to take place today in court. But just to separate the issues here, because there are several lawsuits.
Yes.
Starting off with there was the impasse that we were covering, where there were a number of days, I think it was 7 days, where there wasn't any activity happening at the port. Limited activity happening at the port, and that was something I know that there was a lot of attention played on whether or not government would intervene, whether the strike was legal or illegal, and of course the business community even spoke out saying, this is unsustainable because you can't just have business go to a halt. So that was the primary issue. The negotiation that came out of that, as you noted, was the government signing an MOU with the CWU, committing to $1.5 million for losses that they say they have experienced since the privatization of the port. Now, the first suit is, of course, PBL seeking relief for the loss of income that they suffered because there were delays, ships turned back, they went down to Big Creek. So a number of things happened where they estimate a loss of revenue of about $1 million, and they sue CWU for those damages. But so that's the first case. But subsequent to that, with the government committing to pay $1.5 million, Tux Vasquez
the receiver.
is as the receiver, the representative for the receiver, then filed a suit saying that the government is not, it goes against the Constitution for the government to be able to disperse these funds without going to the House.
Yes.
And then the money was dispersed.
Okay, so if I may interject
Yeah.
quickly. So while we had the Prime Minister on record last
Yeah.
Tuesday, what he said to reporters on that particular issue was the fact that those monies would have been allotted for in the upcoming budget. Right? However, the turnaround from him saying that that morning to the monies being deposited into the account that very same day,
Yeah.
it raises certain questions because as journalists, we were asking, what is the procedure? Should that go before the House of Representatives and tabled to get the approval of Parliament before the money is then put forth in the account, or what takes place at that point? In the context of the Finance and Audit Reform Act as well, I believe that was part of the discussion on Tuesday.
Yeah, you're right. And I wanted to say, too, that in that interview, he said he hadn't gone over the letter in its entirety because there were two parts. There was one, the legality of it, but the second part was an injunction to stop the disbursement of the money. And as you said, in that interview, he gave the reasons why government believes it is a legitimate process, so the process can be legitimized, and subsequently dispersed the money to CWU. So now the injunction is now upon the CWU for the disbursement of the funds. So a very complicated, there are two different cases there, but a very complicated story, and I know one that people have been following since, you know, the impasse and the previous strikes that have been held before. This is a continuous challenge for the stevedores and the CBU to be able to, the CWU to be able to work out their agreement when it comes to working conditions for the stevedores, expectations on how to efficiently conduct business at the port. And I want to for me, I think that's one part of it, but I think we can't separate the implications that come because they're unable to work out an amicable agreement.
Yeah, you're perfectly right. When these kinds of tensions and industrial action takes place, it hinders the flow of business in terms of exports and imports into the country, right? And so there's naturally a financial implication due to the loss of revenue there. So we put that there, but at the same time too, we're also looking at what's taking place with another pending action by the ASR-BSI with respect of a $500,000 suit that is supposedly being brought against the government of Belize, which also had promised indemnity to the Belize Sugarcane Farmers Association last month when they too had their deadlock between the farmers and the miller in the northern part of the country. So while the Prime Minister has also gone on record to say that he would hope that cooler minds or cooler heads prevail in this matter in terms of ASR-BSI not proceeding with the lawsuit, that is still to be seen as to what direction or how this will be resolved. So we're looking at both of these instances or both of these events, so to speak, very closely to see what the outcome will be. Now, to move away from that, Marlene, this is going to be a huge week for the government of Belize as we host the heads of states from various CARICOM nations, and they will be converging on the island of Ambergris this week, and there's a lot to be discussed with the CARICOM summit. There's a whole lot, including climate change, including the situation that's happening within the region on a whole in terms of security and all of these other stuff. When we have this kind of a meeting, the heads of states, in this case you have the prime ministers and now the president being able to share certain concerns, not only on a country level, but from a regional perspective as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a very busy week ahead, and you know, I think people have been hearing about the upcoming meetings. There are two separate events that are going to be held over the next 3 days. And what we're looking at is the first, it's the 33rd intersessional meeting of heads of government of CARICOM. That starts tomorrow. The arrival started as of yesterday. In fact, we had two of the delegations from CARICOM arriving yesterday. Bahamas arrived yesterday after 4. And you also saw the arrival of the delegation from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Now, this is the first time the heads of government are going to be meeting since the pandemic. In person, I should say, in person. They've been doing virtual meetings. And so it is a really healthy indicator, I think, for the rest of the region that, that they are taking the time to come in person to be able to discuss matters affecting members of CARICOM. That meeting is going to be held the 1st and 2nd, as you said, in San Pedro, and they have a long list of items on the agenda. Yeah. One, of course, we're looking at COVID-19, and it's both from the health aspect and the economic recovery. Climate change is a big topic for the entire region, and that will also be on the agenda. The continued implementation of the single market and economy, CSME, as well as looking at situations at Haiti, border issues with Belize and Guatemala, Guyana and Venezuela, food security. So there's so much to discuss, and it's really going to be a really exciting opportunity that it will be hosted here. As you can see, here is the other delegation arriving. So the heads of state arrive today, and the meeting starts, the remainder I should say, and then the meeting starts tomorrow. The opening session will be aired on television live, and of course it'll be right here on Channel 5, and that starts at 9 a.m. tomorrow. But that's just day 1 and day 2, the 1st and the 2nd. Immediately following the intersessional meeting for CARICOM will be a CARICOM-SICA summit. And this is the 4th CARICOM-SICA summit. The last one was held in 2011. And that means that the heads of the Central American countries or their representatives will be joining the members of CARICOM to sit and discuss matters that affect this entire region, this little, connector between North America and South America. A large number of countries, very often we're seen as smaller but with less influence, but together we're a powerful force. And so I think it's a great opportunity, and it goes back to, I think we say it all the time, but it's really to be able to see it where it's enacted, where Belize actually becomes that bridge between the Caribbean and Central America. So that takes place on March 3rd. Now there are a very big part of this, the CARICOM-SICA meeting is that the United Nations Secretary General will be in country to participate. He will be visiting Belize. He will be taking a look at some of the work that we're doing here, but he will also be addressing the CARICOM-SICA summit. And so that is a very big opportunity for us here in Belize, that we get to show him the work that we've been doing. We understand that a big part of the focus of his visit will be looking at climate change and the effects that we've been facing here, and also some of the other ongoing projects that we have.
So indeed, it is a packed week for government activities, and I know that coverage of this will be here on Channel 5. We'll be out on the island. We're already out on the island, and we're going to ensure that we get as much in as possible in terms of interviews with these various heads of government, and of course to be able to speak on the issues that are being discussed. So that's the second topic for the morning. The final topic is from an international perspective in respect of what's taking place between Russia and the Ukraine. We know that the invasion of the Ukraine started late last week, And as a result, many countries have come forward denouncing what is taking place in terms of Russian President Vladimir Putin having the Russian army enter into Ukraine, particularly to certain areas of Ukraine, including Kiev, Chernobyl, and of course the other major cities. Now, there have been a number of sanctions being imposed upon Russia by the United States and the European Union, which includes removing certain Russian banks from the SWIFT system, which is a network or an apparatus that has been put together to facilitate financial transactions. And I know that as recent as this morning, Russia's central bank, has announced that it is increasing the rates on the percentage on certain transactions from 9.5 to 20% as a result of the sanctions that are being brought against Russia because of what is taking place, the armed conflict between both countries. So we're watching that keenly as well, because it is, for all intents and purposes, an issue where, while not all countries have come forward to say we're going to align ourselves with either Russia or the Ukraine, the major countries of the world, the superpowers as we would say, do have certain kind of influence that they wield in terms of what takes place on the ground there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of big developments over the weekend from the crisis in Ukraine, and it has been really unfortunate following the coverage. The first that you spoke of was the sanctions that have a direct economic impact.
Yeah.
There is a meeting that is to be held between Russia and Ukraine at the border in Belarus.
Yep.
And the anticipation going into that meeting, well, you know, I think there aren't high expectations on this matter being resolved, but what is clear is that the direct impact that Russia had anticipated they would have, or the immediate impact, hasn't quite panned out. The Ukrainian forces have been able to hold them back so far, and I say that cautiously because there's already been loss of life. There's already been a mass exodus of Ukrainians heading out to seek refuge in other countries. And, you know, it's as we all pay attention to what's happening in this side of the world, I think it is critical for us to realize that these things don't happen in isolation. There are effects that come as a result of war, and especially when you're talking about second largest producer of fuel in the world.
Natural gas.
And it is a matter of paying attention and recognizing that the longer this continues, the more unstable that region becomes, the more we will have to face the implications of that.
I think, and I described this elsewhere as looking at this situation as geopolitics at play, right? How the dynamics between, in this case, two countries affect other nations around it, and of course other nations that may be far away that are dependent on goods and services and trade with either of the two countries, right? Another observation, and this may be somewhat separate, but it ties into the bigger picture, is the fact that when Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, there wasn't much that was done by the international community to speak out against or to try to stop that from happening. So that when you look at what is taking place between Russia and Ukraine now, one could argue, well, the fact that perhaps little was done then sort of empowered the Russians to thinking or believing that it is okay, or they're confident enough to say, well, we'll invade another country. I think if you look at it from that point of view, it kind of gives a broader picture in terms of what has been happening in that part of the world for the past several years.
Well, you know, the warnings have been there the past few weeks, and I think one of the things that you can note is that the sanctions are coming. I think the latest update is that the U.S., this is from CNN, the U.S. will ban Russia's central bank from making any dollar transactions. Yesterday, we also saw the European Union in a historic move, commit to providing weapons to Ukraine to keep on fighting against Russia. These are all very monumental moves that are taking place in order to stop what is taking place. Whether that will be the case, we don't know. So we keep on paying attention, and you know the matter changes hour by hour.
Yeah. It's rather fluid, so we're following it closely. All right, so that brings us to the end of our Eye on the News this morning. It's rather extended, but hey, there's a lot that we covered over the week, and there's a lot that we'll be continuing to cover during the course of this week. Remember, details of these stories and more you'll be able to catch at 6 p.m. on our evening newscast. You can watch it live on 5, or you can catch it on Facebook or YouTube.
And moving into our lineup for today, we're bringing it back home, of course. We saw the Statistical Institute of Belize provide the latest data coming out when it comes to talking about the economy. This morning, we're going to be joined by the CEO in the Ministry of Economic Development and Investment as we break down how the economy is performing.
All right, so that's our first conversation. So the second conversation is with the Executive Director of the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center, Dr. Colin Young, who will be discussing the upcoming meeting, as we mentioned earlier, and of course how 5Cs ties into the whole idea and topic of climate change within the region.
All right, so we got two great conversations lined up. We're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we're going to be joined by CEO Dr. Osman Martinez. But before we go, we got a birthday shout out. We're saying happy birthday to
Marina Flores. There
Marina,
she is.
you have a lovely day today from all of us here at Channel 5, and open your eyes. We'll take a break. We'll be back in a few.
In these trying times, Smart is here to lessen the burden. Smart's reduced roaming rates save you while traveling. Calls back home are a low 35 cents per minute when visiting Canada, the US, and Mexico, or pay as low as 50 cents for calls when visiting countries in the Caribbean, Central, and South America. For the month of February and March, enjoy an unbelievable low rate of 30 cents per megabyte when roaming with mobile data in Canada, the US, Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean. Whether you are a business traveler, studying abroad, visiting loved ones, or just traveling for pleasure, Smart's new roaming rates have got you covered. Roaming in China, Europe, Central America, South America, and the Caribbean is as low as the cost of making a local call. It's that low. Smart's roaming coverage continues to grow, so you can also enjoy affordable roaming rates in several destinations across the globe. For more information on rates to other countries, visit our website or call 1090 for more details before you travel. Smart, bringing people together.
It's almost lunchtime and Alice is getting hungry and forgot to bring cash. She remembers that eCash now has a geolocation feature in which she can easily view the eCash merchants near her, especially restaurants. Her co-workers also ask her to order food for them.
Chicken chow mein, please, and a Coke.
The merchant sends her the payment link. She taps confirm, and within a few minutes, her food is delivered. Alice then views her transaction history and taps on the transaction recently made. Then taps the split the bill button where she selects the unevenly option and moves the bar to the desired amount per person. The request is then sent to her friends. Her colleagues accept the request and are ready to enjoy their meals. Geolocation and splitting the bill via eCash make Alice's life a whole lot easier.
Introducing next-gen supersonic speed for the ultimate home Wi-Fi experience. New customers can now enjoy faster residential internet speeds of 25, 50, 100, and 150 megabytes per second, as low as $49 a month. Existing next-gen customers will receive an automatic speed upgrade at no extra cost to reflect our new supersonic speed. Count on us to keep you connected with the speed you need at unbeatable prices. Select the internet plan that works for you. Make the switch and sign up today. NextGen, bringing you the ultimate digital experience.
I'm Jada Brown. I'm strong. I'm unstoppable. I am paddling for the rights of women and girls in Belize.
Hi, my name is Tina Herrera, and I'm paddling to end violence against women and children.
I'm Jasmine Armstrong, and we are paddling for all the women in Belize.
We
are paddling together to break the bias.
And welcome back. Our first conversation, as we mentioned prior to the break, is with CEO Dr. Osman Martinez from the Ministry of Economic Development. Good morning, CEO.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me here this morning.
So there's a lot for us to discuss this morning in respect of Belize's economic performance within the context of the pandemic nonetheless, and how we're able to rebound amid this situation. So first of all, the SIB has released its latest figures, and that, coupled with the recent IMF report,
Right.
there's a lot for us to be able to unpack there. Let's begin by discussing firstly the stats from the SIB in terms of Belize's fiscal performance.
Well, first of all, we have to look at GDP, which is the most common indicator that is being used to measure economic growth in any nation. And Belize is not the exception. 9.8 growth, people have taken lightly. Some have called it is a natural growth, but it is not. It is. It also shows the strong leadership by the Honorable Prime Minister Briceño. It is important to note that he was criticized when he opened the free zone. Now the free zone is contributing between 8 to 10%. The Briceño administration was criticized at the time of opening the borders. That will enhance and will enable a bigger growth coming forward, and also generate a creation of jobs. But it is important to note that in 2020, GDP decreased by 15.4%. Our growth now is 9.8%, which is a recovery. Okay, so many people may ask, but I am not seeing the effect of the growth. And that is because it is a recovery. So, for example, there was a decrease from 2019 to 2020 of 15.4%, and now we have 9.8%. So we are not at the 2019 levels as yet, but we are working to get there. However, the IMF, as you mentioned, and the experts thought that we will only have a 2% growth in 2021. The experts actually forecasted that growth will, recovery will take 3 to 5 years. And it seems that maybe by the end of this year, we will easily be back on at the 2019 levels.
What does that speak to, in your opinion? One, the resilience of the Belizean people, where employment and job creation and, of course, expenditure is concerned, or is it that this is something that is perhaps being prompted, in a sense, by other happenings within the region?
It is by division, again, of the Briceño administration, and I'll tell you why. because the Briceño administration understood that the only way, that we will generate jobs is by enabling a friendly environment to investors. Why? Because in the past, under the previous administration, the Barrow administration, the private sector was killed, and I'm not saying it. It's reports from IMF, and it shows as well on the ease of doing business. In the ease of doing business, for example, in 2020, we were at rank 98 out of 172 countries. And in 2020, we rank 138 out of 172 countries, which means that Belize became a country, a difficult country to conduct business. Okay? We have to be clear in one point, that the drivers of economic growth is the private sector, it's not the government. The government is not an entrepreneur. The government is a policymaker that enables an environment to grow. And I think that is the position that the Briceño administration has taken, and is empowering the private sector and also the MSMEs.
CEO, let's go back to one of the primary points. I know that people who will be critical of any proclamation of growth will say, which is simply, comparing 2021 to 2020 is like apples and oranges, for the simple fact that that first phase of the pandemic, there was almost a global lockdown. And 2021, there was an expected rebound when people started moving again. There were more clear mechanisms on how to prevent COVID-19 spread. How do you respond to that?
Well, we have to look at other countries. Look, for example, at Argentina and countries in South America. They're still suffering. Countries within the Caribbean, in Central America, in Europe. The United States, have been criticized for having a stagnant economic growth. So the recovery is not an easy one. Actually, it is a difficult one. Okay, why? Because we have limited resources. We have to recall that Belize was borrowing $1 million per day. Okay? And then the economy was in the march of collapsing, where you could have seen devaluation, where you could have seen rise of taxes, where retrenchment could have been massive within the public service. None of that happened. So the answer is, let's compare to other economies.
So agree 2020 and 2021 were very different scenarios, but you're saying that based on the growth, or I should say the decline that other countries have faced, or stagnation, that's where you draw your comparison on Belize's success.
Yes, and you have to look at it that Belize, the Briceño administration came in with a plan. Many people does not acknowledge that plan. For example, the first one was to do debt management. You have to remember that our GDP was 132.5% debt to GDP. Meaning that you had to borrow $1 million.
Every dollar you owed.
Exactly. Plus, you had to borrow to pay, $1 million per day. And the second part is to stimulate the economy through the private sector, okay? And these are things, a woman takes 9 months to deliver a child.
Ordinarily.
There is a science as well in developing an economy. It's not overnight. It's not like turning a light switch on and off. It takes time. It's like, I recall the idea from CEO Garcia on developing the investment summit. Many people are asking, and when will we see results, this takes time. An investor will come in, they will have to do feasibility studies, they will have to do so many other things, find the finance, the place where they will invest, what kind of product, the markets. So it's not an overnight,
I think
but you have to start.
To that, as well as you mentioned earlier, is the ease of doing business in Belize, to be able to facilitate that kind of an environment where people can come in, do their scouting, look at the feasibilities, and be able to source the funds that they would need to develop their business.
Yeah. But on another note, it is important. So, for example, and it's a recommendation, a humble recommendation that I have, and I will give to all the media houses. There should be a criteria to look at economic performance on how an administration is doing. And I believe we have to start to compare what the present administration have done in comparison to the previous administration, to the Barrow administration on the first year. So when you look at year one performance, 2009, what was the Barrow's administration performance? 0.3% growth. What was and actually he declined the economy because there was a 4% growth in 2008. So there was a decline in the economic growth. And then you find now in this first period of first year of Briceño administration having a 9.8%. Natural recovery would have been 2%, hence the reason the IMF stated and forecasted a 2% growth. You know.
Let me ask another quick question.
I just want to note there, though, just in absolute fairness, that was around the time of the global recession as well in 2009. So there are factors, as we'll look at 2020 and perhaps say, well, that was the pandemic year, there will be those insights that are contributed. But I want to come back to one of the things you said before.
But I want to ask you a question on the global recession in 2009. How did it affect Belize? Did we lack the airports? Did we lack a total lockdown of movements of people? Were they borrowing a $1 million per year? There was a fiscal space because the Barrow administration at that time inherited debt to GDP of it was 87%, I think. 87%, meaning that they had fiscal space. No, we had all the contrary. Adverse of it was that we had 132% GDP. So if I, for example, I'm very close with the private sector, and one of the things that the economic recession brought and Belize benefited from was inflation, because the cost of goods at that time were very low. You know, and so we have to look. No, we are dealing with an adverse. Inflation is high.
Yeah.
So the challenges that we have, I mean, when you compare
my question, CEO.
But I think
how do we?
But we have to put it in perspective.
How do we look at economic growth on one hand, and on the other hand, there is the crushing cost of living?
Yes.
How do we? Because the average person would want to know, in layman's terms, how am I seeing, how am I benefiting from this so-called economic growth if when I go to the grocery store and I look at items on the shelves, they are costlier now than before?
That is a good question. And the problem is that Belize imports 53% of the goods that we consume. And inflation is everywhere. So when we import something, we are also importing inflation. Okay, if you look at the numbers with SIB, and you look at, for example, production of tomatoes, sweet pepper, actually inflation, we had deflation, the price decrease, which means that this is a great opportunity for Belize to be more productive. We have to produce more. If not, the world will dictate to us, they will dictate the cost of consumption, and inflation is one of them. Fuel, okay, it's expensive everywhere. So we import fuel, but tomatoes, with pepper, beans, we are producing them. So there is which means that we have a great opportunity to become more productive within our nation.
Let's come back. I want to press on that a bit more, because I know the fuel cost is one of the things that's all people will talk about right now, in addition to prices that they face at the supermarket. And I think Isani's right. You know, economics from your point of view versus economics within the average household, they mean two different things. One means, what can I do with what I've earned? What is the value of the money I've earned? And for you, you're looking at it from a macro level. But coming back to some of the efforts that were made, what are some of the things that beyond tourism, which was already something we're earning revenue from, what were some of the strategic moves that contributed towards the growth?
Agriculture for the first time, you know, so the primary sector, you know, something that agriculture have never led any economic growth.
That includes the cattle that was allowed to go over
into pigs, and now there is the Honorable Minister Mai and his team, they are doing an excellent job in managing the data of what is being produced in Belize. In the past, for example, there was always a confusion that, oh, we produce carrot, but we are importing carrots. So I know the Honorable Minister Mai, he reported last year that all the vegetables that were produced in Belize were sold. And now, just about 2 weeks ago or last week, he was heading the first shipment to El Salvador.
Yeah.
And you know what? He was driving. He was driving, you know. So, and this speaks well about what the Honorable Minister is doing, you know. And so these are the things that we have to look at.
Now, agriculture is one. Let's talk about other areas. Debt management was another, of course.
Yes.
The opportunity to access the blue bond was a huge marker as well.
Yes. And well, agriculture, no, we are trying to empower and working in enhancing a friendly environment for MSMEs. Okay, one of the things that, and that was one of the first meetings I sat down with IDB. IDB did produce some data that was very interesting and shows where Latin America and the Caribbean countries, that 99% of the businesses were MSMEs and 1% were fall within the large-scale enterprises. And when you look at that, governments had focused on producing policies for the 1% and forgot the 99%. So, which means Belize has around 44,000 MSMEs, which means that if we empower them and they generate one job per year, they will be generating 44,000 jobs. You know, and that's the basic and foundation for economic growth, that people should be able to access jobs and good jobs. Okay, so that's one. Two is access to finance. Finance is a huge problem in Belize, especially for MSMEs, because not one of the financial institutions, they will take a risk with a startup. Normally, I learned this when I was in Colombia in a workshop regarding entrepreneurs, that only the 3 Fs will invest in startups, you know, and that's family, friends, and fools. You know, so startups, they're always a risk, you know. And so that is a point we are looking at. Another point that we're looking at to continue with economic growth is to see how we can access more concessionary loans, especially from the Green Climate Fund. Hence the reason DFC is already in the process of getting accredited. CIF is also in the process along with the Ministry of Economic Development, you know, because once we can access more finance, then it can be targeted to certain sectors that will benefit certain sectors with low interest rate, because that's a killer.
Let's go back a bit to the MSMEs. I know that there is one organization, at least one, that serves as an apparatus to empower micro, small, and medium enterprises. This would be Beltrade, for instance, that facilitates small businesses to be able to flourish from there. But while you have that, and I'm certain that Beltrade would be able to walk a young entrepreneur through the entire process of getting his or her business off the ground, you do have the lending institutions on the other hand that would serve as essentially investors, because if you're seeking a loan to be able to start a business, you have to produce a plan, one that is sound. Shouldn't these two things work in tandem in terms of being able to create that kind of business environment?
That should be the ideal situation. No? But I don't think Beltrade or anyone will be able to tell any commercial bank, you know, this is approved. I know that Atlantic Bank has been a very good, has a very good relationship with Beltrade, and they have allocated X amount of funds to help startups, you know, and MSMEs. But we also have to look at the other hand. And the other point, and that's the informal market, you know, and that becomes difficult because how can you come before or go before a commercial bank without having a proper documentation of your businesses? And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but we are working on that direction, and I have invited academia, you know, to help us with it. You know, we are very serious, and I believe academia can play a key role, and we have to activate that stakeholder, academia. Why? Because they can do research and development, they have the know-how, they can use their students during internship instead of the student trying to come and learn more. I mean, it's time about them to share the knowledge that they have earned during 2, 3, 4 years being at the university, you know. So how can we help a young entrepreneur or any entrepreneur how to do proper booking, marketing, you know, accounting, you know. So all these things, or even to look at the cost of production, because that's a big problem in Belize.
Or market research.
Or market research. Yeah. So we have to activate all the stakeholders because we have a lot of resources that we are not using in Belize.
Now, you know, I appreciate what you said about the access to finances, because that's one of the biggest challenges that MSMEs will face. And being able to kind of have the foundation work is going to help.
Right.
But then also just having a market that's open. So you said that the DFC and SIF are two of the areas that you're looking at for concessionary loans. And it's also ensuring that policies that exist are more conducive for startups. You know, the person who opened their door the first day and GST come knocking versus the larger businesses who have outstanding debts for taxes.
No, I believe that even Social Security, you know, I believe that digitalization will help a lot moving forward with the present issues that we have, because there is delays. I mean, we have to reduce the time of, or the ease of doing business in Belize has to improve to policies and what type of incentives can be given to MSMEs. And so these are policies that we definitely will have to look at. And we are looking at them, hence the reason we are developing the medium-term strategy for the government, which should be completed by the end of, well, by the middle of March, we should have something out. But, and it is on that line, you know, where and how we can improve the ease of doing business in Belize, but at the same time, all the other sectors, you know, which is health, which is education, the social protection component, which is key in the development of a nation.
One of the things this administration campaigned on, and in fact in opposition spoke very loudly about, was the need to diversify the economy. 2020 taught us well. Tourism is here today, and we would have never imagined that arrivals would be zero, as we saw in 2020. So having alternative sources of revenue for the economy is key for us to survive, whether it's a hurricane and agriculture, or diseases, or even a hurricane and how it could impact the tourism industry. Where are we with that?
The main concept here, why diversify the economy, okay, is because one, let's imagine that $1 was printed at the Central Bank of Belize, and it comes to the commercial bank, and then I get paid. All right, so I am ready to introduce that dollar now into the ecosystem. However, the first thing I do is I will go and spend all my money on fuel. So the first problem I'm having there is that this dollar only had one multiplier effect within our ecosystem, and then it exits our ecosystem. But if I would have bad tomatoes, maybe I would have 2, or any other product that is being produced in Belize, it would have had more a multipliers effect within our economy. So why diversify the economy is because you need to keep your dollar in Belize much more longer. Why? One is because before it exits, no? One is because every transaction has a revenue for government. But every transaction also generates job in Belize. But if from the first time that that dollar entered the ecosystem, it exits our economy, then it only had one multiplier effect, and it benefits other nations. And this is where the diversification needs to come. Added value products is the next, is where we need to go as well.
Let's go back a bit quickly. So how do you then put into focus a lot of the online purchases that is taking place? Aside from the amount of monies that we're spending on the cost of fuel, which goes out of the country, when you look at the boost in online purchases, people are shopping on Amazon and all of these other outside platforms where inevitably the Belize dollar ends up going. So how do you put that into perspective?
And that is even worse because it didn't have our currency or our money did not have the opportunity to enter the ecosystem not even once. It exited before it was even jump into our ecosystem.
And again, it's against the push that we're saying shop Belize.
But at the same time,
But it's not just online, it's going across to Mexico. I know a lot of businesses were concerned when people would be able to shop again. They have every right to do so.
Exactly.
But that's part of what you're talking about.
So these are problems, but in order for us to fix this problem, we have to find alternative where you will be able to purchase those same items at home. If it is not at home, then what will happen? You will have to purchase them out. I mean, let's be real. The shirt, the clothes that we are wearing right now, there is no way you can find it in Belize. It's imported. So it's imported whether you buy it locally or international. So the system, the economic system that Belize has and which needs to change is an economic system of buy and sell. Hence the reason the Chinese understood the system very well. You will see they will not join the productive sector. They will join the buy and sell. The buy and the sell, you know,
The
and which
retail
is
sector.
Yeah, so it's a very good. It has worked very well for Belize, but not for the macroeconomy. It creates an instability in the macroeconomy and also a renewed pressure on foreign exchange.
So when you talk about focusing on spending the money at home, I mean, it's going to be a long time before we're able to have enough being produced in country that we won't have to spend on imported goods. What's the alternative in the interim as we want the economy to grow?
Well, we have to look at other sectors where we have a comparative advantage, because that's the other part. No? So, for example, it may not be feasible for us to maybe make Guayabera shirts in Belize, but we can actually increase the export of cattle. We can increase the export maybe of Mary Sharp, you know, who have won, and congratulations to her, you know, who was the best, come up the winner, no, the best sauce.
Best flavor in Dubai.
Dubai.
Yeah.
You know, and so.
And now in Walmart
you
too.
know, exactly. So when you look at that, that's a supply chain where what? She will need more habanero pepper, you know, so we have to look at the farmers, maybe look at some data and say, well, we have to increase this sector. So we have to look at where we have comparative advantage. We export bananas, we export sugar, also to a certain level of aquaculture. Wherever we have the comparative advantage, that's where we need to increase. That's the immediate comparative advantage that we have where we can take advantage of.
You're looking at as well at quality and standards too, though. Because for you to be able to put any product out on the international market, there are certain specifications that that particular product has to meet for it to qualify, so to speak.
Right.
Right? And while we're talking about alternative revenue streams for the economy, if we're looking at trying to boost export, then we also need to fall in compliance with these standards. Like, HACCP, for instance, for any product that is being shipped out of the country, that is food related or what have you, right? So when you look at trying to create these new opportunities, you're also looking at these strict measures that need to be complied with.
I agree, and then, but we have to acknowledge that the Belizean people are capable of doing it. And I will tell you why. You know, one example, look at the cattle industry. It was something an industry that wasn't moving forward. It was not formalized. You know, under the leadership of the Minister of Agriculture, Mexico has put so many regulations in place, and Belize is compiling with it, which means that at the beginning it was hard, but we have the capacity to do it. Bananas, for example, bananas goes through a rigorous process in order to enter the European Union market. Well, no, it's the UK and the European Union market. When you look at the sugar industry, it's similar. You know, so we have the Belizeans are capable of doing it. It just need guidance.
What about, there is the Ministry of New Growth, and we have been talking for over a year about potentially developing the cannabis industry in Belize. What are your thoughts on this?
We have to be in parity with the rest of the world. I mean, cannabis is an industry that is generating good dividends to the macroeconomy in other countries, for example, the United States. So why not Belize, a country that has the environment and a country that, that it lends itself, you know, to produce a product of high quality, and one that will generate jobs, will also benefit from the foreign exchange, and will contribute to the overall growth of the economy. Why not?
Do you, I mean, are there moves to be able to formalize this? I know there are concerns when it comes to how do you bank income earned from cannabis until it's legal everywhere. But, I mean, are there considerations being made? Because I still go back to the same point, you know. We don't know, our economy is fragile, you know, and we learned that in 2020.
Yes. I believe that that will be a better question for the minister and his CEO to respond to. But I know I sit on their committee, and they have done a substantial progress, you know, because to have a correspondent bank to accept the payments, that was one of the issues that they were having. But at the same time, I know that there has been some significant improvement on that aspect, you know, but I do not have all the details, and I believe that the Honorable Minister Musa and CEO Kevin can better explain that situation.
All right, and other new areas that we can look forward to in the year ahead. So we talked about a focus on MSMEs. You talk about a push. I remember when there was a broad campaign, a very well-known campaign, Buy Belize, Build Belize. That's probably really old, but you know, reminding people of the economic benefits of when we shop at home.
There is an economic benefit in terms of macroeconomy, you know, and what I would want to encourage academia and Belizeans is for us to become more innovative and produce more, you know, whereby we can, maybe the tourists can purchase some items, or export other commodities, or produce some of the items that we are importing, but we have the raw material at home. So for example, I'll give you 3 examples. One is we export beans, but we import refried beans. That opens an opportunity for an entrepreneur to have a business in Belize. 2, we produce pineapple, we export pineapple juice, but we import processed pineapple, the sliced pineapple. That again opens another avenue for a Belizean to have, a Belizean entrepreneur to start a business, to start a business in that field. Then we have, for example, we export corn, we produce corn, but we import maseca. Okay, I understand that there is something already that is being worked out there to see how we can produce it locally, but it lends itself again into other opportunities.
That's the idea of us not necessarily being able to capitalize on opportunities where value-added products are concerned.
Right.
We're more primarily focused on exporting what we would call raw materials, so to speak, as opposed to being able to create the value added here for export, which would fetch higher on the dollar.
Exactly. At the same time, in addition to that, another sector that we need to increase in Belize is the introduction of science and technology. There has to be more science and technology in the agro-productive sector. Why? Because for example, look at the production of tomatoes and sweet pepper. It happens around this time of the year, and then there is a decrease in price. Then we import, and the price goes right up. So how can we produce during the 12 months of the year using greenhouses, a proper irrigation system, solar panels?
Which would lend to cost stability as well, because if you're looking at the prices being relatively low at one time of the year, and in another time of the year, because of the imports, it goes high, you would need to create an industry where you could produce year-round and keep the price at one constant level.
Exactly, and it will benefit both the consumer and the productive sector.
Yeah.
And Belize we need to be aware that we need to be more productive. Why? Because we are now in globalization and in economic system of globalization. And how does this system affect us? Simply as having this war between Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah.
There are high concerns about inflation again.
Of course.
Okay, Russia and the Ukraine being the second largest producers of crude oil and natural gas, but it also has a domino effect because they are also importers of fuel. They are the largest. Russia is the largest importer of gasoline from the United States. But there are other sectors that we are not looking at. So, for example, last year we had issues with microchips on vehicles, on computers and everything. Now, Russia is #1 exporter in the world of the material that builds the microchips, like platinum, nickels. So that is a problem. Now, there is another issue that I haven't heard on the media, but that needs to be contemplated. I mean, everything is being controlled now from the International Space Station, where Russia is a part of it as well. And internet.
Yeah.
If we were to be without internet for a day, is a problem. What about when you look at other possibilities of media houses? Just passing this image from here to every television, at home.
This is, and I think, the implications are far-reaching, and we haven't really dived into it as yet, but I can't let you go without talking about the fuel situation. As you clearly pointed out, globally, the cost of fuel is increasing. Given what is taking place between Russia and Ukraine, there are greater concerns that the cost of fuel will go up. Now, for us, we can't negotiate the prices of the fuel. But what is a continuous resounding call is that government should assess the taxes that are placed on fuel to somehow allow alleviation for people who are buying.
I think the government is handcuffed in that aspect because the fuel revenues that the government collects is between 17 to 20%, between 15 to 20% from revenues from fuel. Now, the government also has the pressure of giving back salaries to public officers, and whenever you remove tax from an item, that means you will have to find other ways of how to get the tax.
Yeah.
which means at the end, the price in the fuel pump, if the government was to remove the tax, will become an illusion because it will be taxed somewhere else. Okay, so it is a sad situation, and I honestly I pray to God every day that the price of fuel globally will go down, because the government of Belize is handcuffed, you know, and he has a gun on his head, you know, because the pressure that is there is significant, and so it is not an easy task.
Well, it's all the more difficult when you campaign on a platform that the cost of fuel, perhaps under the previous administration, was exorbitant and very little was done to address that situation. People buy into it as somewhat of a campaign promise, and then you fail to deliver. Perhaps we've gotten to a point where if there were releases being issued regularly when the cost of fuel goes up at midnight, now it's sort of surreptitious in a sense, where it is snuck in quietly. We've gone from one extent to another.
But I believe that, going back to your saying the announcement of fuel price, I don't think it was one time that I have noticed it, and I don't think it was any malicious intent from the government of Belize. There must have been something happened somewhere, because I mean, the government, we must acknowledge that it had been brave to put the good and the bad news out there, you know, and I don't think you would want to be pinpointed as that. No, when you go back to campaign about the fuel price to be low, I agree with you, but at the same time, for example, you have to look at when it was said and how it was said. So, for example, I recall at that time, leader of the opposition, now the Prime Minister of Belize, Honorable John Briceño, when he spoke about it, it was because there was some delays in decreasing the prices on the pump in comparison to what was being produced, the cost that the barrel of crude oil was being produced out there. And I'll give you an example. During the pandemic, for example, the fuel price was actually, the producers were paying countries to take the crude oil with them. But at the pump, it was still at $9 in Belize. And that is what the leader of the opposition at that time criticized, you know, no the PM. No, we are being faced with some prices that is horrible, you know, and a government that, whereby, as I stated before, 132.2% debt to GDP, a fragile economy, and when you look at the instability of the macroeconomic that was there. So it is a tough one.
When you look at government being able to absorb 50 cents on the dollar in terms of this most recent increase, which would see the gallon of fuel, if not, I believe it's diesel, inching up to almost $13. That is crippling for any business. It doesn't matter if it's public transportation, it doesn't matter if you're in the agriculture sector, you need fuel to be able to generate your business. And when you look at the extremely high cost of fuel, perhaps it spells why there is such an expense on the shelf as well.
Right. No, it has a domino effect. It has a domino effect to the consumption and everything. But just look at, for example, shipping. You know, that is, we have to do nothing with it. It increased by 300%. The government has nothing to do with it. So right away, that there is a cost pass on to the shelf and to the consumer. Then when you look, for example, at, I look at some numbers. If the government will reduce 2 cents per gallon, which means nothing to any consumer, the government will lose around 300 million yearly in revenues.
Just by a 2 cent reduction.
Just by 2 cents reduction. So which means that if the government was to touch and to play with any numbers in regards to fuel, means that something else will have to be taxed.
So then we're applying a fixed formula to the acquisition cost of fuel as to why we wouldn't be able to tamper with it?
It is a fixed formula. It is.
Christine.
That's some sad news to close off on. I'll give you the opportunity as we wrap up, because I do take your note in looking at the growth that has been recorded, but we'll end it where we started it. You know, I think Belizeans want to feel the impact of that growth. And if it won't come from fuel, what are other opportunities where the cost of living can go down and the recovery that we've been seeing will actually have an impact on their lives?
The first thing is that all Belizeans should be able to access a good job. Okay. Now, the other part that the government needs to continue to work on, and I believe the Honorable Francis Fonseca and Honorable Minister Sabane are doing a tremendous work, is in education. And we need to, well, they're starting already in the south side Belize City with almost free education at the secondary level. You know, and that is being looked as a pilot test, which should be replicated later on throughout the country. So education is key. Okay, why is key? It was key because education should not be part of sustainable development. Education is sustainable development. Okay, so if you look at anyone who has a high level of education, that person is generating a good income right now. Okay, but anyone who has a low human capital, that person have a minimum salary. And so the first thing we need to do is to fix that problem. Why? We have 52% poverty in 2018.
Pre-pandemic.
And that was pre-pandemic. We might almost be at 60% now. So the first thing the government needs to do is to continue to make sure that everyone has a job, which the Brazilian administration has done a tremendous job, coming from 30% of unemployment to a little less than 10% now. But still, there is more to do. 2 is access to education. 3, we need to improve in the health system. We acknowledge that the health system was actually a system that was destroyed. And so now it is to not only repair, but to transform the health system. 4, citizen security. Okay, that needs to improve. It's not a problem now, but it's a problem now, but it's a problem that we have had throughout the history of Belize, and that needs to change. And 5, continue with a infrastructural development where it will continue to help Belize in growth, both in the optics and in creating of jobs and making Belize more attractive for investors. And then,
shouldn't 5 be ranked a little closer to 1, perhaps? Or is that only the philosophy of the previous administration, where they were looking at infrastructure development as the primary driver for the economy?
Infrastructure development is good, okay? It's very good, but it should not be number 1, okay? Infrastructure development, I believe that education should be number 1, okay? And that anyone who comes from a history of, who have a history of coming from a family that was considered poor, can tell you that the only reason why we are here today is because of education. So education is a long-term investment, and it will not have overnight dividends and results, but it do have a long-term effect. So hence the reason education to me. 2 is the productive sector, okay? Because you will not be able to pay any debt without having revenues. Okay, so infrastructure is very good, I'm not saying no, but there has to be a point of equilibrium between the productive sector and infrastructure development.
All right. Well, we thank you for this update this morning, trying to break down these numbers. We see the graphs and charts, and we understand what growth means, but we have to put it into perspective. So thank you so much, CEO.
No, thank you. And please note that the growth is a recovery.
Yes.
You will start to see, and I will borrow a famous word from Honorable Minister Koi, you know, we are not on transformation as yet, but we do hope to get to that stage where we can start to transform the economy.
Okay.
So thank you. It was my pleasure.
All right. Thank you, too. And with that, we're going to go ahead and take a break. The next conversation is all about climate change. It's top on the agenda for the next few days for the CARICOM meeting as well as the CARICOM Seeker Summit. So please stay tuned.
Technology is ubiquitous, and it's transforming how, when, and where we work. Fulltech Systems is placing award-winning devices in the hands of information workers, allowing them to work without compromise in a world without wires, to innovate, create, and to maximize productivity anytime, anywhere, satisfying the needs of the desk-centric remote and field worker and every other worker in between. We are providing the industry's best devices to businesses going through the process of digital transformation. Partner with us today to provide the solutions that will allow your employees to work effectively and efficiently to enhance your customers' experience. Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price but stay for the service.
The ministry is collaborating with SpeedNet Communications to have a vaccination campaign for children ages 12 to 17 years. Children who get vaccinated will get a chance to win fabulous prizes, including backpacks with supplies, Nintendo Switch, tablets, book tuitions, and MiFi with 3 months data. Only children 12 to 17 years old can participate in this Smart and Ministry of Health and Wellness raffle. At vaccination sites, each vaccinated child, upon being vaccinated, will receive a ticket to place their name, age, date of birth, BHIS number, and contact information on, which will be filled out by a parent or legal guardian. The sooner a person vaccinates, the more chances he or she will have to win. Get vaccinated, please. Vaccination saves lives.
I'm Jada Brown. I'm strong. I am unstoppable. I am paddling for the rights of women and girls in Belize.
Hi, my name is Tina Herrera, and I'm paddling to end violence against women and children.
I'm Jasmine Armstrong, and we are paddling for all the women in Belize.
We
are paddling together to break the bias.
It's almost lunchtime and Alice is getting hungry and forgot to bring cash. She remembers that eCash now has a geolocation feature in which she can easily view the eCash merchants near her, especially restaurants. Her co-workers also ask her to order food for them.
Chicken chow mein, please, and a Coke.
The merchant sends her the payment link. She taps confirm, and within a few minutes, her food is delivered. Alice then views her transaction history and taps on the transaction recently made. Then taps the split the bill button where she selects the unevenly option and moves the bar to the desired amount per person. The request is then sent to her friends. Her colleagues accept the request and are ready to enjoy their meals. Geolocation and splitting the bill via eCash make Alice's life a whole lot easier.
If you're looking for low-cost television advertising, have we got a deal for you? Advertise on Channel 5's Daily Classifieds. Channel 5's Daily Classifieds is one of the most effective methods for introducing yourself and your business to the community. Use our Daily Classifieds to recruit employees, promote specials, promote your products or services, promote a business opportunity, increase traffic to your website, and advertise items you have for sale. Let us help you save valuable time and money. Call us today at 223-0146 or visit us at our offices on Pony Drive to discuss how we can help your business grow affordably. Channel 5's Daily Classifieds. Advertise today.
And welcome back. Our second conversation of the morning is with the Executive Director of the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center, the 5 Cs. We are joined by Dr. Colin Young to discuss what takes place later this week in terms of the overall picture of climate change within the region and of course, in Belize as well. Good morning, Dr. Young.
Good morning, Isani. Good morning, Marlene. Good morning, viewers.
So as we began earlier by stating, this is a big week packed with a lot of different activities on the national and the regional front. One of them being the upcoming meeting with the CARICOM heads of state, and the topic of climate change being one of the prominent discussions to be held this week. Let's begin there, excuse me, from your seat as the Executive Director of the 5 Cs.
Well, the 5 Cs was set up by CARICOM heads of government to coordinate the Caribbean's response to climate change. And actually this year represents the 20th anniversary of the signing of that agreement that established the center. And since 2005, when it opened its doors, it has been coordinating and providing technical support to the CARICOM Secretariat as well as to CARICOM heads of government. And so, for example, one of the key roles that we play around every conference of parties, and everybody was talking about Glasgow and the COP26, and it was the last best chance of this decade to keep global temperatures at 1.5. We would have prepared a number of technical briefs for ministers and the CARICOM heads of government that outlines what's at stake and what should be the sort of political and technical approach to the negotiations. And so, as you know, the heads of government had attended the COP and the Leadership Summit. CARICOM had what we called our expectations of what COP26 would look like if it was successful. And so now the heads are going to be looking at what came out of COP26 relative to what we thought would be a success. And so there would be a report on the agenda that is going to be considered. But of course, it's also going to be looking forward. COPs are not an end in and of themselves. They're part of a process. And so whatever was not achieved in COP26, it gets put on to the next agenda.
27 will handle that.
COP27. Hopefully, right? And so part of what is going to happen is that the heads will be discussing what happened, what can we do differently, what do we need to do for COP27.
How do you respond to anyone who would argue that all the conference of parties that discuss environment and the climate is more lip service than it is action?
I would say that in many ways that is an accurate representation. I mean, this is COP26, which means it's the 26th time that the global community has met to discuss what for us in the Caribbean is an existential issue. Our lives, our livelihoods, and that of our loved ones are at stake. We see it, we feel it. You go down to villages like Monkey River, you see the flooding happening all over the world. You see hurricanes and its impact on Barbuda and Dominica and other places. So you can find examples everywhere you look of climate change. And the progress internationally, globally, has been incremental at best. You get sort of little steps forward, and some people would argue you get a couple back. And so, for example, going into Glasgow, one of the big ticket items for us was that, look, the science was very clear. If you want to keep global temperatures from getting to 1.5 degrees Celsius above since the 1850s or so, you have to cut back the amount of greenhouse gases that you're putting into the atmosphere by 45%, right? Well, unfortunately, we did not achieve that. So even though you had large emitters from the US and the EU and the other G20 countries saying that the time to act is now, when we left Glasgow, we are on a path of still arriving at 2.7 degrees, and in fact, on a path of increasing emissions by over 13% rather than a 45% reduction. So from that point of view, absolutely it's not fast enough. But I also want to put that into perspective, because when you're asking 197 countries who come from different realities, and there are only about 20 of them that are causing the majority of the problem from a global climate change point of view. The G20 countries are responsible for over 80% of all of the emissions. And so this is also a climate justice issue. But It's like saying, you know what, I have 196 of my friends, and we'll decide that we're going to go eat at a particular restaurant, and that the menu is going to be rice and beans and peas and chicken. And then you're asking everybody to agree to that, right? It's very difficult. You know, you'll find that people don't eat meat, they don't eat beans, they don't want this. And in a sense, I'm simplifying it to have people understand that what we are asking for, there are some countries who are antithetically opposed to what is it that we in the Caribbean might want. And so they fight to protect their interests. And as a result of that, getting everybody to agree on language, because now the agreement is not on the food, it's on what the words are going to say, because words have meaning.
The literature of it.
Actually is you have to then negotiate, you have to compromise, you have to abandon certain positions in order to get something, because people will tell you it's best to get something rather than nothing in some cases. And so Isani, you're right. However, over the last 26 years, there has been progress, albeit slow, and at a rate and a pace that is insufficient to keep global temperature below 1.5. And in the meantime, we are suffering.
Well, I think that is the fundamental point. And I, you know, reflecting on COP26, and I know even the meetings this week, it's kind of setting the groundwork for COP27 in Egypt. We see scenes like this that we have been reporting on in the media for years. And this is not just water on a beach. This is communities that are evaporating. They're being washed away. I say the marker time and time again. When you reach the point that you lose your dead, that is irreplaceable. You could give me a house somewhere else. You could give me a land somewhere else. You cannot replace the place that I put my loved one. So I think that these are all issues that across the Caribbean have been faced. How does, the impact of the meetings coming up, having both CARICOM and Central America, once again focusing on climate change, what is the opportunity here?
The opportunity is for solidarity across CARICOM and SICA and Central America, because in truth, while politically or geopolitically we are in different divisions, the truth is that all of the countries in Latin America, especially Central America and the Caribbean, are under the threat of climate change. And these are threats that we are already seeing are increasing in frequency and increasing in intensity. And so having close partnerships, strategic partnerships, sharing lessons, and most importantly, unifying voices in terms of the climate change negotiations is powerful. When we look at SIDS, CARICOM, a small group of countries, and then when we broaden it to small island developing states, we're about just under 50 states globally in the Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, Caribbean. But then now when we start to roll in Central America, parts of Africa that are very vulnerable, these are the G77 and China, that you could start to get the kind of muscle in terms of the negotiations that can help. Because it's about building alliances. And more numbers you have, the better your options are in trying to negotiate outcomes that are better. And so this is, I think, an incredible opportunity for us to really see how we can not only build that alliance and that solidarity, but on the practical level also, how can we help to improve the resilience of our people
so we talk
to climate change?
We talk about constructs such as carbon credits, for instance, right? And the fact that countries that perhaps emit less would be able to gain more credits. We also look at the idea of vulnerable countries, as you've mentioned, the small island developing states being among those vulnerable countries. But then you look at the G20, who you've described as the primary culprits, if I may, right? Are there any penalties or sanctions involved so that for smaller countries like Belize, who perhaps emit less and may fall within a certain threshold in terms of it being able to access carbon credits versus one of those G20 countries that is part of the 13% overall emission that we're trying to reduce. How do you balance that in terms of penalties and sanctions?
Well, that's a very good point, Isani. In fact, one of I guess perhaps the biggest criticism of global agreements like the Paris Agreement, which was historic, was the fact that it has no legally binding implications. And so countries say that they're going to do A, B, C by a certain time frame. They don't do it, then there's nothing you can really do except to, as we say in Creole, badmouth them, right? And sort of showcase the lack of action that is happening to their peers and their colleagues and their friends. There is, however, a very important element of what you just asked that has been and continues to be very, very contentious in the negotiations. And this is one that is surrounding what we call loss and damage. Recall that the whole idea of the Convention for Climate Change, there's an implicit recognition that it is not those who are most vulnerable that are causing climate change, but the wealthy developed countries. And so in a sense, the liability for the effects that are being caused by climate change rests with those who cause it. However, those same countries have been fighting tooth and nail to have loss and damage recognized as an issue about liability and compensation. Because if we can now start to say, you know what, country A, country B, country C, you're the ones putting this amount of greenhouse gases, as a result, my people are dying, my
Simply put, they
cemetery,
don't want to pay for the damage that you caused.
They don't want to pay for the damage that you caused, because now if there's this recognition, people can go to court, right? And then courts can award damages. So that issue, though, is one that the region, the CARICOM, indigenous peoples, vulnerable entities, youths, and so on, are now starting to challenge in courts. But as it relates to getting an agreement, one of the things we wanted as CARICOM when we went to Glasgow was for the world to set up a loss and damage facility where monies would go into this fund specifically to compensate countries for some of the damage and loss that they would have incurred. Countries fought that. Instead of getting a facility, we got a dialogue, right? We will have some more discussions between now and 2024, and perhaps in 2024 there might be options available as to what such a facility would look like. So that is an emerging issue and one that is going to become even more contentious.
So allow me one quick follow-up here. I look at that in the context of the whole Blue Bond initiative and the conservation that Belize will go through as part of the restructuring of the super bond, for instance. So you're saying, okay, well, we need to be mindful in terms of how we treat our environment and be more minded when it comes to conservation and what have you. But then the imminent threat is climate change. And it's a situation that we're not necessarily contributing to, but you're asking us as perhaps a part of this agreement that we need to comply with these stipulations, but the bigger picture is a phenomenal one that we don't really have much to do with.
Well, implicit in all of that, Isani, is that one, I think SDG 13 is about climate action and 17 is partnerships. And what we have been able to do, when I say we, CARICOM and SIDS, is that despite the fact that we are not the cause of climate change, we've always led by example. We've led from the front, right? So when you look at Belize's initiative in terms of this Blue Bond and setting aside 30% of its marine environment in some sort of protective status, remarkable. When you look at the fact that the most of over almost 70% of Belize's forest is still there, and forests sequester carbon and helps to mitigate climate warming. When you look at countries across the world that are small and vulnerable like us, despite all of that, they're still doing their fair share. In fact, per capita, a lot more than what some of the larger emitters are doing. And so we are not just saying, you know what, you need to give us money to help us adapt. we are also walking the talk by doing things like protecting our environment, like ensuring that we have not only terrestrial but also marine environment. And that has been, I think, one of the biggest cards that the region has been able to say is we're not just going to the table empty-handed. I know what we're calling on you, the G20 and G7, do your fair share in terms of cutting back emissions as well as putting the money that you promise that you would give to the most vulnerable in the world.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, that's the message that we look forward to hearing. Anytime we see any CARICOM representative speaking out against climate change. But I want to bring back to another event that is happening, and of course that is the visit of the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, and of course part of his visit while participating in the CARICOM SICA Summit is also to take a look at the impacts of climate change in Belize. Tell us a bit about the impact of a visit like this for us.
Well, I think having the head of the United Nations visit any country is a big deal, particularly a small developing country, but going to a particular village, like in this case Monkey River Village, I think is incredible. It's an incredible opportunity to really do two things. One, it showcases the effects in a very graphic and tangible way of what climate change can do to our community. Marlene, you talked about one of the fundamental parts of our human psyche is the sense of place, where you're from, where you grew up, where your ancestors are buried, where all of that. And to be able to see that climate change is one of the contributors to why this village is literally being washed away. And this represents what I'm calling a harbinger of what the rest of the region will have to face with the increasing levels of sea levels and impacts from climate change. The second opportunity, I believe, is the visibility and high profileness of this visit, that it can turn into some tangible progress on the ground to help that community. As I said, in terms of we've been seeing it. Channel 5 has been covering this particular issue for probably now 15 years, 20 years or so. And every time you go down there, you see the situation getting worse. And so hopefully, the government of Belize will turn this into some tangible projects. Because part of the issue is raising the funds that are needed for the interventions. And I know that the government is very interested in working with partners, including the center, and UNDP and others, to see how is best to address in a very tangible, practical, efficient way. And I think having the SG visit a village like this, we have to capitalize on that.
Imagine having the photographic memory of seeing it firsthand. But, you know, I do want to make note, of course, you do represent the CARICOM as well, the other CARICOM countries. What's another example? We use Monkey River as our example. We see it as well in Dangrega for erosion. What's the other examples across the Caribbean that are notable, that share the same level of tragedy in terms of effects of climate change?
Well, fortunately, there are lots of examples across the region. And Belize is, in this case, is one small village, population of just about 120 people or so now. And for Belizeans, it's easy to get lost in the scale. Right? Because you have a country like Belize, which is relatively large compared to small islands like St. Kitts and Nevis or Dominica or Anguilla, or smaller islands in the region. And so what you find, Marlene, in lots of the other Caribbean islands is that parts of it, right? There are parts of the island, which is the entire country small. You can, Barbados, again, for length of size, you can drive around from one end to the next end in about 2 hours in the island. So what you find out is that there are areas within communities in St. Lucia, in Barbuda, and elsewhere where the erosion is as pronounced, right? Now, when you look at some of the projections over time, depending on what the global temperatures are, in some cases, you know, we will create situations where entire communities, and in some cases entire countries might have to relocate because the cost of the adaptation is simply going to be too high. In the Pacific, we don't have any countries in the region yet, but in the Pacific, you can read about prime ministers and governments purchasing land in other countries in the event that their people will have to leave their country, not a part of their country, their country, to relocate in other parts of the continent.
Yeah.
So in fact, just today, there was a major publication that was produced by the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They produced one just before the COP, and now they produced one that looks at climate impacts and vulnerability and adaptation. And it was startling, just as we knew and how we are feeling and seeing. So much so that the UN Secretary General made some quotations that I think absolutely are on point. And it reflects the gravity of what climate change is to us. And if I may just quickly, a couple of them. The first thing he says is, you know what, it's clear that any further delay means death. This is saying that we have to act now because we're seeing that death is a result of inaction and of failure to act. You talk about lip service. Lip service translates into actual death and lives lost of people. He says that the report is an atlas of human suffering, and this is the part that I think is particularly important. And it's as a damning indictment of failed climate leadership, right? And then he also said that, look, this is not an issue of us trying to figure out anymore whether this is climate change causing what we're seeing. And he's saying the abdication of leadership is criminal, right? It's criminal. Now, you go back to your issue about loss and damage earlier that we talk about, and to what extent can we hold countries accountable for their failure to act, and that's a separate topic. But here you have, who has been, I have to say, the UNSG has been an absolute champion and lead advocate of action and the fact that the vulnerable people and countries in the world are suffering at the hands of climate change, and he's consistently called for action. I wanted to share that because not only is he coming and seeing firsthand what is happening in terms of climate change, but he has also been calling for the kind of urgency that hitherto has been absent in these negotiations. And yes, we have a lot of talk, we have a lot of promises that don't translate into action. And I think what you would hear, and what we heard when the heads spoke at the Leadership Summit and spoke at Glasgow, is that this talk has to stop.
It's interesting, though, how much climate change has now registered within global conversations. And you know, it perhaps has not resulted in the level of action that is necessary to deal with the damages that we've seen. But when we talk about, for example, the UN section coming to see some of the impacts of climate change, in addition to having participation in other meetings, when you talk about even the Duke and Duchess, they'll be traveling to Belize, also interested in climate change as well. Do you think this is momentum being built for the types of decisions and commitments that are necessary to alleviate the problems we're seeing?
I would definitely hope so. You know, as I said, going into Glasgow, I think when I was here and elsewhere, people had asked, what is going to make COP26 different? Yeah. And I had a cautious optimism that we would have gotten more than what we actually got. And they asked me why, and I said, well, if you look at what's happening around the world, you know, you see the fires and the floods in Germany, in parts of Europe, you know, in the States, what's happening in terms in California and Oregon and all these places. You had this report that came out that says unequivocally, humans are causing this thing. It's happening faster than we thought, 1.1 degrees. So I thought, and then now you had leaders of the countries, including the UNSG, saying, this is the last best chance for us to act. And so when I start looking at the things, checking off, well, that's good, that's good, that's good, that's good. And you thought that, okay, people are finally in a position now where they understand the urgency. And then you had the outcomes of COP26, right? And so, but these negotiations, Marlene, is a marathon, not a sprint. And sometimes in the multilateral process, incremental progress is the best you can get at some points.
Yeah.
And I am hoping that with this new report that came out today and the momentum that has been building globally, least of which is the impacts that we're suffering, that we will move beyond the politics and the polarization to be able to act globally. Because really, it is for humanity we're talking about. And yes, not all of us are equal when it comes to the impacts of climate change.
And not all of us are equal when it comes to contributors.
Absolutely.
All right. So what's your schedule like for the next few days as we have the heads meeting taking place?
I am going out to San Pedro and participate in the agenda item that discusses COP26 and the expectations for COP27. So, and I might also be traveling and with the UNSG down to Monkey River. I was fortunate to have been a part of a team that did some assessment on the erosion there back in 2007. And I think it's the opportunity for the village. As I said, we hope that we can turn it into some concrete investments to help that community. People don't recognize it, but Monkey River was once a town, a very thriving community. And now, because of a number of impacts, one of which is climate change and sea level rise, but obviously there are also issues happening upstream of the river that is important. But I think it's a nice example of how climate change accelerates and is a risk multiplier. And I think we can use what's happening in Monkey River as a sign of what is to come if we don't act early and we don't protect our environment.
There was a really powerful interview with a young lady, a young adult talking about not wanting to leave, and that being where her family is from, and hoping that she doesn't have to move. And I think it's really a great example of what we're talking about with climate change in general. We're not just doing it for us, but for the other generations as well. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming in this morning and having this conversation.
And thank you too. Thank you. And thanks to Channel 5 for, I think, being one of the longest stations to cover this Monkey River situation, because it brings it into people's homes in a way that talking about it doesn't. It's powerful. So thank you.
Okay. With that, we're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll have our wrap-up. So stay tuned.
Who offers the best home internet experience? The truth is, Digi, of course. Diginet has the largest fiber network and the fastest speeds with the most reliable service. That's more learning, more earning, more gaming, more bonding, more sharing, getting more things done. And now, Diginet is even more affordable with the new entry plan, a 20 megabits per second fiber connection for just $49 monthly, and increased speeds in all plans. The truth is, only Digi has the ultimate home internet experience, with savings up to $270 when you bundle. Wireless and cable can't give you that. So what are you waiting for? Sign up or make the switch to DigiNet today to enjoy more speeds to get more done. Digi, our national telecom.
Why should you wear your mask? To protect myself. My friends. My family and others. I wear my mask because I love my grandparents. With so many reasons to wear a mask, we continue to advise persons to wear a face mask properly, covering both nose and mouth. Together, we can keep Belize COVID-19 safe.
Your life just got a lot less complicated with Belize Bank Contactless MasterCard Debit Card. Introducing our Standard Debit and MasterCard Platinum Debit Cards. Now you can make purchases anywhere MasterCard is accepted with one tap, pay and go. Your contactless card never has to leave your hands, especially in these times. And your card is embedded with multiple layers of security. Platinum card holders get to enjoy extra benefits like price protection, purchase protection, trip inconvenience, and luggage protection, just to name a few. Start enjoying a cashless lifestyle today with the Belize Bank.
Lamb's Funeral Service can assist you with a dignified send-off for your dearly departed, offering a complete funeral package which includes cremation, dressing, preparation, and repatriation of remains. Caskets, wreaths, and tombs are uniquely made by us. We provide quality service at the most affordable price. Give us a call or WhatsApp at 626-5732 or 623-2597. During ceremonies, the option of live streaming is available. Lamb's Family Funeral Service. It's not just a business. We are a shoulder for you to lean on.
We have been a partner with Smart for over 10 plus years. We have a full Smart plan we use as our major driver for our business. We have a service that rolls over in that if you call one and it is busy, it rolls over to the next line. So once you call us, you can get us at any time. Before we got this Smart service, we were paying upwards of nearly $2,000 in phone bills. Since we've had our Smart service, we pay an average about $600. So we've had tremendous saving, more than 50%. For the businesses, if you want to save money, switch to Smart because it is far more cost effective and the service is excellent.
Smart continues to be innovative in bringing new technology and meaningful savings during these challenging times to businesses across Belize. Sign up for our VoIP technology or broadband packages and save more.
And we're back.
We are back from economic development and rebound to climate change and its impact, not only on Belize but the region.
Yeah.
I think we had two very strong conversations this morning.
Yeah, really thought-provoking and not separate, in fact.
Yeah.
Because while we talk with Dr. Young from the 5 Cs looking at climate change and the Caribbean and some of the upcoming events, when we talk about mitigating the effects or recognizing how climate change is already causing problems for countries like Belize, it goes back to one of the points made earlier with Dr. Martinez, CEO Martinez, talking about how with agriculture, we have to face the weather patterns, new weather patterns, droughts cause problems with agriculture. We've seen so many different things happen.
Yeah.
And we're so highly vulnerable.
I think to look at the idea of our economy and the turnaround over the past several months. So while we accept and acknowledge it as such. I mean, the numbers don't necessarily lie,
Yeah.
but at the same time, for us to be able to digest what that means on an individual level, I
Yeah.
think having the CEO break that down for us into bite-sized crunch allows us to be able to fully appreciate what the overall picture is and how we as households fit into what is taking place with economic recovery.
Yeah, you know, and he's very cautious to say recovery and not growth, because it's like you know, you owe a large amount of money, you earn enough to owe less.
Yeah.
Just very simply putting the situation that we're in, but it's progress nonetheless. I do think the challenge will always be that as we, you know, as viewers tune in, that that it sounds great, but people want to feel it.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to feel it. They want to go about their day, not feeling such a tight pinch on their pockets for every little activity that they have to do.
Yeah. So
and
that
his
was-
remarks about fuel were very sobering.
Indeed.
20%.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we're going to be battling with for quite a while going forward. It's just the reality. And while we're clamoring for prices to go down, you know, we just got to wait and see what gives, at least on the international market where the cost of fuel is concerned.
Well, you know, I had a thought about this weekend. We spoke with Mayor Wagner last week, who said there's going to be a pilot project for electrical buses within Belize City. And I think if there's ever been a time for more efficient transportation system, it's now when fuel prices are going. I mean, there's always been a need. Let's not get mistaken. But if there was a very efficient system in place, in other parts of the world, people park their cars, they catch the bus, they catch the train, or they ride on their bike. That's not feasible for us. And it's not because, you know, there may not be people who are willing, but it's because we don't have efficient systems in place, efficient and comfortable as well. So I think that's also, you know, I thought of that this week, and I said, imagine if there's a very reliable, comfortable bus that you can be able to get to work on time, not sit in there and wait till the driver decides the bus is full enough to move, or until the taxi shows up, or if the dollar cab, you know, doesn't make 20 stops on your way to work. So these are all things that can help in situations like these, but unfortunately we don't have them to fall back on.
Yeah. Well, I can recall, and I don't want to be pessimistic, I just, you know, hinge on being real. I can recall perhaps a year or so ago, maybe more, where there was the idea of the electrical car being introduced to Belize. And that didn't necessarily take root. So if there's now the notion of electrical buses, well, I'll wait and see. I'll leave it at that.
All right, so that is, of course, our closing thought for today. If you would like to contact us, we do want to let you know that, of course, for the next few days, we are going to be providing live updates from the CARICOM intersessional meeting that will be taking place in San Pedro. We'll have a team out there. And also the CARICOM SICA Summit on the 3rd. So you'll be able to hear what is happening. You'll find out more about the ongoing discussions, and that's going to be a big part of our coverage this week, live from San Pedro. But in the meantime, if you would like to send us questions, comments, concerns, send us an email at oye@channel5belize.com. You can also find us on Facebook at Open Your Eyes BZ, and on Instagram at OYEBelize. And remember to tune in tomorrow morning at 6:30 when you open your eyes.
Start your morning right.
Until then, keep your eyes, your mind,
And your hearts open.
We'll see you soon. Enjoy your day, please.
Open Your Eyes was brought to you by the Belize Bank. Our country, your bank.